All right, so I don't normally do this, but I thought that maybe I could say this better than I could write it. And I thought it was something maybe I needed a video instead of just podcast. So Satan knows what buttons that he can push on us. And I think anybody who's been a Christian very long knows that. He knows what gets us down. He knows what maybe gets us pumped up just so we can get down. He's not opposed to letting us get all jacked up for God or something else and then jerk the rug out from under us, I guess, so to speak. So I maybe more so in the last 5 years maybe have come to realize that I have a lot of trouble processing things that don't come easy. Fear, anxiety, those are things that I never thought that I had any issues with. I guess, when you're a kid and when you're young and, you just think every day is great and not a big deal. What would you worry about? But as you become older and as you try to do things for God, as you try to do things just in this life in general, life has a way of kind of beating you down sometimes. And it seems like as soon as you try to do something, a little extra, or, it's not like yay me or anything like that. But, as soon as you take a stand for God, Satan's not far behind to push your buttons. And so for me, when he does that, he likes to dig up bones that, should have been buried a long time ago, and doubts and fears and things that I need to let go. But I don't know why it is, but we keep those things in a corner somewhere, and he can bring them out and show them to us pretty easily. I read scripture and don't read it as much as I should, but it's funny that at times when we need it, God shows us exactly what we need, points out exactly what we need, brings something right to your mind. And that's why I think he's showing me we need to be in the Word, because when we're at that moment, when we need that verse, when we need that, that advice from that only God can give, if we haven't been in it, we can't recall that verse, because how do I know it's there? And so there may be times that I'm reading and I think, well, what does this mean? Why do I apply? Why am I reading this today? Read it 100 times, and then today you need it. So I was just sort of, we're doing this podcast, and I'm, I don't know. I'm not, it's not in my wheelhouse, but it's not super far out of it, I guess. I've spoke in church, I've preached, I've taught, all those things. And so I guess I came into this thinking, this will be great, and this will be another avenue to just share some stuff, and it'll be like that. And I don't know. Satan has a way of kicking your feet out from under you, and so he's done that to me today. And honestly, there's very little reason, but anything he can do to make you doubt, anything he can do to make you be still, when God's trying to tell you to move, he'll pull anything out he can, and it may be the smallest thing, and it doesn't even have to be true. He'll start making you question things and doubt things and have conversations with yourself about arguments that never even happened. conversations that never even happened, but like, what if, what if this person, has a problem with something you said on there? What will you say? And the next thing you know, like, you're going down this road of how you're going to defend yourself in this imaginary conversation. Maybe I'm the only person that does that, but that's what he does. He hits us all exactly where where he knows will get us. And so I was in the music room actually practicing for our worship, praise and worship service, part of a service tomorrow, and was listening to some of the music. And sometimes it's easy when you're playing music to just get caught up in, what chords I have to play and all that. And so while I was listening to that, I was playing, and I'm not a super emotional person. I'm a funeral crier. I'll cry at funerals at a drop of a hat. Don't have a bit of problem shedding a tear, but I'm not an emotional crier. But I was downstairs, and I was just going through the set for tomorrow, and this song Above It All, Over All I Know, it came on, and we've sang it before. I've listened to it a bunch, but I don't know. It just like knocked my knees out from under me. Like I just put my guitar on the floor and laid down on the floor and cried harder than I probably have in a long time. And I don't even know where that came from. I haven't had something like that in a long time. It felt good, but I don't know. I'm still processing things. But, just listening to the words of that song, you tell broken things be healed in their whole. You tell fear it has no place, it must go. You tell death it has no chance, it won't win. And if you are for me, God, what can come against? Why are we afraid? I think Satan likes to remind us that we're not perfect, and he likes to bring up things that God's already forgotten about. But humans seem to have a long memory at times. We like to remember the things that God's forgotten, and we like to say, I know God has forgiven me, but I can't forgive myself, right? You've heard that. And I heard a preacher one time that said, are we better than God? If God can forgive us, why are we holding on to it? So I got to work on that. I got to work on the fear of stepping out of the boat. And so while I was laying in the floor, crying like a baby, two things popped in my head. The first thing that popped in my head was something I never would have thought in this moment. But here it is. Then Moses answered, this is Exodus chapter 4. Then Moses answered, but behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord did not appear to you. The Lord said to him, what is in your hand? He said, a staff. And he said, throw it on the ground. So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent. And Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, put your hand and catch it by the tail. So he put out his hand and caught it. And it became a staff in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. Again the Lord said to him, put your hand inside your cloak. And he did. He put his hand inside his cloak, and he took it out, and behold, it was leprous like snow. Then God said, put your hand back in your cloak. So he put his hand back in his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. If they will not believe you, God said, or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. If they will not believe even these two signs, or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the ground, and the water you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. All right, so God's telling him, I'm going to be with you, and I'm going to prepare you, and I'm going to build you up bigger than what you are so you can do something for me. And after all of that, after Moses saw all those things, he starts by saying, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord did not appear to you. And he goes and shows him these three things, and he gives him the ability to share these things with other people. And here's Moses' answer. After all that God shows him, Moses said to the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue. Then the Lord said to him, Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. But he said, O my Lord, please send someone else. So this podcast thing may not reach millions, but this is something that I never planned to do. Don't have any aspirations of being famous or anything, but I feel like God gives us all something to share. And my fear is that we'll find a way to not tell it because we're afraid of what somebody will say, or we're afraid that God or that Satan will bring up all of our imperfections. Just as soon as we try to look like we're doing something good, he'll try to show us something bad. That's what he does. Here's Moses, right? Moses is like the man. And God showed him 3 miracles and gave him the ability to do them. And he says, yeah, I can't do that. I mean, send somebody else. And so I was laying there and I thought, Lord, it seems like it would be a whole lot easier to just sit and listen. Because as soon as you try to do something, you get knocked in the teeth. And so the next thing that popped in my head was this. As Jesus, and this, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but as the disciples were in the boat and Jesus comes walking on the water. And in verse 28 of Matthew chapter 14, it says, And Peter answered him, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. And he said, Come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried out, Lord, save me. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, Truly you are the Son of God. This is a very popular thing. And for whatever reason, we always focus on the lack of faith that Peter had. And we say, well, if he hadn't taken his eyes off of Jesus, then he wouldn't have sank, right? He was doing great. He was able to walk. And then as soon as he looked and he saw the wind and he started to see that he was actually doing this, then he got afraid. And so we always say, if Peter would have had more faith, right? We never, just turn your eyes upon Jesus. I've heard it preached a million times. I've preached it myself. I've taught it. I've read it. And here's what God is telling me right now. Peter was the only person in that boat that said anything. The other people said, we're saying stuff, but like, of all the people in the boat, Peter says, if it's you, ask me to walk on the water and come to you. And he says, okay, come on. And you'll notice that nobody else in the boat said, me too. I want to go too, right? What they all do? They stood back and they watched. And they watched Peter step out of the boat and walk on the water. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. And as soon as I think he was probably saying, I'm doing it, I'm walking on the water, then Satan said, you're walking on water. Look around you. And he did, and he sank. But nobody else offered to get out of the boat because it was safe in the boat. They wanted to see what would happen to Peter. And some of them were probably saying, see, I told you. Told you he couldn't do it. And some of them might have said, well, that's pretty cool. It's farther than I would have got. At least you tried, right? And some of them maybe would have said, one day I hope I have the courage to do that. But right now I don't. But he asked if it was God's will that he could come out onto the water. And Jesus said, come. And he did. And he was able to do it, even if it was just 2 or 3 steps. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with anything that any of us do. I do know that I've gotten a lot of people that have talked to me through this and through another thing that a friend of mine did a while back where we shared our testimonies. And I had some people that shared their testimony through that were so afraid to do that. People were like, I don't like to see myself on camera, or I don't like to hear myself, or I don't know what I would say. Maybe I'll work up the courage one of these days to share a little bit of, why I believe in God, or why I'm a Christian, or that God saved me. But right now, I just don't like doing stuff like that. I'm afraid. And here's what I've noticed. And I'm guilty of this too. The same fears that we have, right? The fear is public speaking. The fear is recording yourself. The fear is listening to yourself on a recording. The fear is, you don't want people to think differently of you, right? All those fears. I watch so many people on their social media or in their life that are afraid to record their testimony or share the good news. Will tell some of the craziest stories, and people will laugh, or people will be like, what's wrong with you? They'll post TikTok videos and selfies, and I don't even know what all those things are called, but the things where, they're doing the voiceover thing for the, I don't know, whatever the latest Disney thing or whatever, whatever it is. We'll put ourselves out there in those ways. And there's nothing wrong with that. We'll put ourselves out there to say, I believe in this political view. I'm for this candidate, or I'm for this stance, or I'm for this position. And then when it comes to what should be the most important thing that's ever happened in my life, we're afraid. Why? Why am I? I'm not in your business, but why am I? Why am I afraid to stand out? In our last podcast, we talked about drinking and, if a Christian could, or, you fill in the blank, whatever it is, can a Christian do this and still be a Christian? I think as Christians, we need to really evaluate the power of our witness, and if we really believe what we say we believe. Because I think that we've seen through this COVID and all this stuff that there's people that have left church that won't ever come back because of a political difference or the way that their church handled whatever it was. They've got their feelings hurt, or they've differed in opinion, or they've said something on social media that they're embarrassed about, and now they can't hardly face their friends again. Or maybe they just weren't in love with Jesus in the first place, and when they went home, it felt a whole lot more comfortable than it did going to church and trying to pretend to have it all figured out. That scares me. And it worries me because there's a part of me that can see that. I'm sitting here looking at this podcast or whatever it is that God will have you do. And I'm saying, nobody really said anything about the guys in the boat. When we read this, we never preach about them. Or I haven't heard it much. We never say, at least Peter tried, right? At least he took the step. He wasn't afraid until he got out there. But all those other people stood and watched. And I'm afraid that our boldness to stand for what's right is lacking, because I know mine is. In our last episode, we talked about drinking and things that a Christian can do, and could you or could you not, and should you not. I do want to preface this by saying that I think that God's grace is big enough to cover anything that I could possibly do, as long as I don't trample on that grace. I also believe that as His people, we're supposed to live from that grace and not try to just, live from that freedom and say, okay, now that I'm forgiven, now that, that I know that God has saved me, I have to spend as much time as I can trying to tell other people how He can save them too. Because I don't want to be like Noah when the door closes and I see so many people around me not on, right? And so if that means it gets uncomfortable, if that means that it makes me nervous, if that means that I lay on the floor and I cry, and I wrestle with things that other people aren't wrestling with. My wife is like, man, your mind is going 100 miles an hour all the time. And I said, yeah, I know. And she said, how do you deal with that? Like, how do she, I don't even think she understands until here, I was talking to her tonight. And I said, I don't know, but like it's exhausting, but it's also really awesome to think that we should never be satisfied. And so if there's something that you think you need to do to step up this year, I urge you to do it. There may be habits and things that you feel like, well, I'm probably okay doing that, but I hope that you all will evaluate and say, is this the best that I could do? Or could I do more? If it means that I change my language, the way that I talk, you could say, well, just words, but words have a lot of power. You could say, it's just a drink, but I would urge you to say, can God use you more without it? It may be just something we watch or something we listen to. You may think, well, Christian music is just music. It may not be your favorite thing in the world, but if you start listening to stuff that's all about Jesus, it's a lot better than anything else that's out there. So maybe this year there'll be something new that God convicts you of. And so my job is not to point out your flaws, because I got a whole lot of myself to figure out. But I encourage you to evaluate yourself. And if there's something that some reason you're sitting in the boat, step out. Ask God for your direction. And say, if it's your will, ask me to come out. Show me where to go. And don't be surprised when you get all jacked up and all wound up and you get just ready to jump. and then Satan pulls the rug out from under you, so to speak, and knocks the wind out of your sails a little bit. Mark Hall said, God, you know how I get. If you haven't heard his testimony, I urge you to look it up. He said, you know how I get. I get all wound up. And just as soon as I'm getting ready to jump, Satan points his finger at me and says, sit down there, dyslexic boy. Nobody wants to hear from you. Because he struggled with dyslexia, and he was afraid to speak, kind of like Moses. And now he's a singer, and he speaks in front of thousands. He's written books, and every one of them, I think he says, he feels unworthy. Why did you call me? But I think he said it best when he said, I didn't need you, I wanted you. And so this is my statement tonight to say, if God needs me, he's not that strong of a God, because I'm pretty weak. But if God wants me, I'm his. God bless you all tonight. I hope this helps somebody.